Joining us now to discuss China's strategy in the South China Sea in Canberra is Hugh White, Professor of Strategic Studies at the Australian National University, and here in the studio, Alan Dupont, Professor of International Security at the University of New South Wales. Both have variously advised Defence and Foreign Affairs Ministers and the Prime Minister. Welcome to you both, gentlemen.
Nice to be with you.
It's a pleasure.
How nervous should Australia be about China's behaviour in the South China Sea, for that matter, the East China Sea? Alan Dupont.
Well, I think we've got every reason to be concerned about what's happened in the last 18 months with the strategy China's pursuing in the South China Sea, because as a trading nation, we send almost 60% of our merchandise trade through that sea to Northeast Asia. We have obviously strategic interests there. It's in our maritime backyard. So what happens in the South China Sea is very important to us.
Hugh White?
Well, I agree, Emma. I think this is a very significant set of developments, but I think in addition to the points that Alan's made, I think we have to look a bit more deeply, because what we're seeing in the South China Sea, this very significant militarisation of a very sensitive area, is in a sense a reflection of a deeper rise in strategic rivalry between the big powers in Asia, particularly, of course, China, Japan, the United States. And it seems to me that it's not just the immediate effects on trade security and so on that Alan's mentioned, but also the deeper question of what kind of region are we going to live in? Are we going to live in a region in which relations between great powers are highly contested, or can we find a way of kind of smoothing those issues over? So I think it is a very significant concern for us, perhaps one of the biggest strategic challenges we've faced in our history.
Well, I was going to ask you to give us some perspective. I mean, where does the bigger threat to Australia come from? Because if you look at media reports and the posture from politicians, the greatest threat at the moment comes from Islamic State fighters. I mean, is the Chinese military build-up in our own region a much bigger concern? Alan Dupont.
Well, I think if you're looking at the range of challenges Australia confronts now, I mean, the issue of what kind of country China is and how it's going to conduct itself is clearly one of the biggest challenges for us, not just for Australia, but for the whole region. Now, I don't like to sort of get into a situation comparing, sort of challenges with each other, but I think ISIS is a big problem for us as well. But the longer-term issue, really, that's going to dominate our security perspectives over the next 10 to 20 years is whether China will be a status quo power or a revisionist power. And if it's going to be a revisionist power, that is, it wants to change the current order, how is it going to do that? How is it going to conduct itself? And is it going to actually directly challenge all the things that we're supporting, international law and the norms and institutions that we've built up and supported over the last 70 years? I think Hugh is quite right to make that point.
Hugh White, American power in the region is based on a sort of security structure in the Western Pacific, in the waters surrounding East Asia, that's really been in place since the Second World War, the end of the Second World War. Are you saying that is about to change?
Well, it's certainly under challenge, Emma. I think, as Alan said, what we're seeing here is a China that I believe is determined to challenge the status quo. It wants what President Xi Jinping calls a new model of great power relations in Asia, and this is really fundamental to the whole region, including to Australia. Because, you know, the whole region of Asia has been peaceful and stable essentially since the end of the Vietnam War because China has accepted America's dominant position. And a few years ago, they just decided the time has come to stop accepting America's dominant position. And I see the sorts of confrontations and military developments that we saw in your report earlier as symptoms of that deeper underlying strategic rivalry. And I think the question is how that rivalry is resolved, what kind of new relationship the US and China, and for that matter Japan and India, build with one another will critically determine the kind of international environment Australia is living in. And that's why I think it's by far and away the most important security challenge we face.
Now let's talk about how it is potentially resolved shortly. But first I still want to discuss the threat a little more closely. Alan, the photos you're using in presentations show an artist's impression of China's new islands with military bases, runways, ports, a garrison. How confident are you that that is in fact China's plan?
Well, I'm pretty confident that 3 or 4 of the islands that it's actually dredging are going to be military facilities of some significance. Now, we don't know exactly yet because this is early days. This has only started about 12 or 18 months ago, so we're yet to see some of these newer islands dredged out. We're yet to see exactly what China's going to put on them. But just to give you one example, that Johnson South Atoll, that clearly there's been a lot of dredging work, and you can tell by the dimensions of the island and what China has done previously that they can put in a significant airstrip there, and they can put in a port facility, and that's pretty clear cut. And by the way, the Chinese have put online their own artist impression of what this island will look like in a couple of years' time. And it's exactly as I've described. So this is not something that's been fabricated by the West, by the United States or anyone else. It's what China has made clear to everyone what it intends to do with these islands once it's fully developed them.
Is it clear to you, Hugh White, what the greater motivation is, what they're hoping to achieve?
Yeah, look, I think it's reasonably clear, Emma. I mean, obviously the Chinese are, by developing these islands, trying to strengthen their territorial claim to them, but they're also more broadly trying to develop their capacity to use them to strengthen their military presence at sea in the Western Pacific, and that's something that the Chinese have been doing very consistently for 20 years now in different ways, developing their own forces, building up bases and so on. And I think that's all about challenging American maritime primacy, naval domination in the Western Pacific. And of course, the sea has always been where American power has been stronger. So for China to challenge America's primary position in Asia, it has to challenge America at sea. And the more it can build up facilities like this which help it to do that, by allowing it to deploy aircraft and so on, the stronger its position vis-a-vis the United States becomes, and that's why it's such a significant development in the growing underlying strategic rivalry between the US and China.
Alan Dupont, are we going to see another air defence identification zone potentially in the South China Sea?
I think it's very possible that China will do that. I think after it declared the first one in the East China Sea, I think it was quite surprised at the strength of the regional reaction, which was overwhelmingly negative. So
including
I think
from our own
including from
Foreign
Australia,
Minister.
of course. So I think they're going to be hesitant to do it, but I think everything suggests to me that they will certainly have the military capability to enforce an ADIZ in the South China Sea in some years' time, should they choose to declare it. So that's something that is entirely possible.
How have they enforced it in the East China Sea?
Well, they haven't really been able to enforce it because the Americans flew a B-52 bomber over and said, well, we dare you to do something about it. So, and China, of course, didn't want to get into that kind of conflict. So it's a bit of, there's a bit of jockeying for position here, as Hugh's pointed out. But if I can just make one point about the South China Sea and what China's doing, let's not forget that these islands are disputed. They do not belong to China. So the question is, are these disputes going to be settled by international law or by military might? And the concern is that China is moving to solve these problems as it sees it, to claim these islands through military means rather than going to seek a settlement in the International Court of Justice or in the arbitration court that's mandated under the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention. They have chosen not to do that. They've chosen to take the military option so far.
Is that, Hugh White, because China's made a calculation that America will back down, that they won't come to the